Question is that this House do now adjourn. Mr. John Bercow.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It is a pleasure and privilege for me to rise to introduce the last adjournment debate of this Parliament. It is a particular pleasure and privilege, as well as an unexpected privilege for me to do so, in the knowledge that it will be answered by the Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State for Health, the Honourable Lady the Member for Pontefract and Castleford. If memory serves me correctly, and I am woefully faulty in these matters, as you are well aware, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I first locked horns with the Honourable Lady on BBC Any Questions on the 21st of November 1997. We have periodically jousted since, and it is a delight, albeit something of a surprise to her, I think, as well as to me, to see her in the House today. The subject that I want to raise is of the very greatest importance. It is the issue of the treatment of diabetes. Interest in this subject, Mr. Deputy Speaker, in this House has been reflected since the 1st of May 1997 in 6 oral parliamentary questions, 110 written parliamentary questions, 14 early day motions, of which there have been 3 in this session, and no fewer than 3 adjournment debates, each of which has been initiated by the Honourable Gentleman, the Member for Tor Bay, first on the 20th of November 1997, then on the 4th of March 1998, and finally on the 30th of November 1999. Now, in preparation for today's debate, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I have received useful briefings from a number of individuals, first from the Public Affairs Officer of Diabetes UK, Mr. Peter Bainbridge, secondly from Mr. Tony Ibbotson, the Honorary Secretary of the Aylesbury and District Branch of Diabetes UK, thirdly from Mr. Adrian Haig, the Marketing Director of a leading diabetes pharmaceutical operation, Novo Nordisk, and finally from Dr. Alex Sleater, who is, of course, the Science and Environment Specialist in the House of Commons Library on these matters. What is diabetes? It occurs, Mr. Deputy Speaker, when there is an excess of glucose or sugar in the blood such that it cannot be used properly. And people will probably be aware, they certainly ought at the end of this debate to know, that there are 2 main types of diabetes. The more severe version of the disease causes its victims to be dependent upon regular supplies of insulin. That is what is called type 1 diabetes, from which approximately 20% of sufferers do suffer. The other 80%, something between 1 million and 1.2 million people in this country at the moment, have been diagnosed as suffering from type 2 diabetes. That is a less serious, though still a very worrying and painful affliction. Those individuals are not dependent upon insulin. They can be treated by a combination of good diet, of tablets, and of occasional provision of insulin. We are talking about not only the 1.4 million people who have, as I advisedly said, been diagnosed as suffering from diabetes, but also of the very large number, something of the order currently of about 1 million people, who suffer from the condition in ignorance of the fact, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And the Honourable Lady for Pontefract and Castleford will know that on average people suffer from the disease for 7 years before it is diagnosed, and it can be as much as 10 years before diagnosis takes place. And I will, in a moment, say something about the very serious consequences of late diagnosis, and therefore of the corollary of late diagnosis, namely the absence for several years of any treatment for the condition. What causes diabetes? Well, in truth, despite many studies that have been conducted over a long period, both in this country and elsewhere, we do not know for certain exactly what causes the condition, but we do know that there are certain identifiable factors which seem to provoke the disease. One is heredity. There is a family history very often that can be regarded, if not as a certain, at any rate as a reliable predictor of somebody catching this ghastly disease. A second is age. People over the age of 40 are more likely to get diabetes than people under that age. Overweight, to put it in its modern form, Mr. Speaker, obesity is a significant cause of diabetes, and regrettably also we know from the empirical evidence that there is sadly a particular propensity to catch diabetes in the Black and Asian communities in our country. It is a truly horrifying fact that 1 in 4 Asians over the age of 60 suffers from the disease. The symptoms of untreated diabetes, and I talked about untreated diabetes a moment ago, are extremely unpleasant, Mr. Speaker. They range from extreme thirst to excessive tiredness to frequent urination to severe weight loss to genital itching and indeed also to blurred vision. The effects, as distinct from the symptoms of untreated diabetes, are even worse than that. We are talking, for the avoidance of doubt and so that people realise the significance of the problem that we're trying to confront, about heart disease, about kidney failure, about amputation, and indeed, ultimately, about blindness. So this is not a common or garden disease to which we shouldn't give much attention. Very often, I think people tend to imagine that it isn't that serious a matter, that it is regrettable, that it involves some inconvenience, but that it isn't, in overall medical terms, a very big deal. Well, what I want to emphasise today, Mr. Speaker, is that diabetes is a very big deal indeed. It is a very big deal in terms of the numbers of people who suffer from one or other variant of the disease. It is a very big deal in terms of the costs to the National Health Service in its diagnosis and treatment. And it is a very big challenge for governments and indeed for all parliamentarians to do what they can to address the problem. It is, I think, the significance of the disease which has propelled the Diabetes UK organisation to issue a challenge to members of Parliament in all political parties. The challenge is to sign up to the Diabetes UK pledge. That is a pledge, those of us who sign up to it make, to recognise that diabetes is a serious disease, to appreciate the importance of early diagnosis, which is accomplished not least through early and comprehensive screening programmes, and to accept, at least as importantly, Mr. Speaker, that each and every diabetes sufferer has a right to receive the best possible treatment that is available, irrespective of who he or she is, where that person comes from, or what particular complications of the disease he or she experiences. We are in possession of some recent and valuable research on the matter, conducted as a result of studies in November 1999 by the Audit Commission, the findings of which study were published in April of 2000. That study by the Audit Commission makes salutary and alarming reading, Mr. Speaker, because as the Honourable Lady for Pontefract and Castleford will know, the Audit Commission found that there were huge disparities as much as fourfold between the number of clinicians available in some parts of the country relative to others for the treatment of diabetes. The Commission also found that there were substantial variations in the referral patterns in relation to the disease. There doesn't seem to be a consistency of practice as between one area of the country and another. The quality of hospital care is frankly very variable. This isn't because there is necessarily any lack of will, Mr. Speaker, but because there is a significant disparity in the numbers of expert clinicians available to treat those suffering from the disease. There is also a problem at primary care level, where there is a major gulf between the expertise and understanding of some general practitioners on the subject and those of others. So far as the sufferers are concerned, there are great differences in the level of education and understanding of the disease. Some people have a great understanding of it and know how best to minimize the symptoms and to improve their quality of life. Others, sadly, because they have not been informed, are very ill aware of what they can best do to help themselves and how they can seek expert and professional help from others. So we do face a serious problem, and a problem that is growing. We are talking about something like 2.5% of the population currently who are suffering from diabetes. The threat, and I don't want to be alarmist about it, but merely to interpret from the facts that we have available to us, is that in the coming years that will increase, and that we will be talking about 3% or more of the population who could suffer from one or other of the variants of the disease. And that leads me, in the short time available today, or the short time that I intend to detain the House, Mr. Speaker, to highlight a number of challenges that I would like to put to the Minister. First, the Honourable Lady will be aware that the government is formulating a national service framework for the treatment of diabetes. I welcome that fact, and I am anxious, as I think everybody of goodwill in this House will be anxious, to ensure that it best caters to those who suffer now and offers the maximum hope of prevention and deterrence of the disease in the future. Now, specifically, in relation to the National Service Framework, I have 3 inquiries that I would like to put to the Honourable Lady. The first relates to diabetic retinopathy. Now, that is not a phrase that readily trips off my tongue, Mr. Speaker, because I am not expert in these matters, but it is very important that we do not allow the complex medical terms to obscure the significance of the subject. The Honourable Lady will be aware of the strong body of opinion that says that there should be regular screening for diabetic retinopathy on, for example, and I suggested as a modest one, an annual basis. It is not entirely clear to me whether the government has decided that should be a headline objective and written commitment of the National Service Framework or not. That framework has yet to be published, Mr. Speaker, and I am not expecting the Honourable Lady to share all of the details of it in advance of its publication with me on the floor of the House, even though sometimes debates in this House can regrettably be the best way of maintaining a state secret. But it would be helpful if she felt able to say something about it today and what the kernel of the government's thinking is. Secondly, and again in relation to the National Service Framework, I am concerned, as I know Diabetes UK is, about the need for a regular and comprehensive screening programme, not of the whole population, Mr. Speaker, which would probably be both superfluous and extortionately expensive, but of the groups that are most at risk from the disease. These are known as the at-risk groups. The Honourable Lady will be aware that specialist opinion suggests that a regular screening programme could be invaluable in reducing the incidence of the disease, and I should be grateful to know from her whether the government intends to go ahead with such a programme. If it does, can she tell me how it is to be implemented, what resources are to be made available for it, and within what timescale she anticipates the objective will be accomplished? Thirdly, again in relation to the National Service Framework, I would like to get some feel from the Honourable Lady today as to how she envisages the balance between the primary, secondary and tertiary sectors in the treatment of the disease. I referred a few moments ago to the variable pattern of provision in hospitals, some good, some bad, some indifferent. Is it the view of the government that in future the volume of resources consumed in hospital care of sufferers should continue and be extended? Or alternatively, as I suspect might be the case, is she thinking in terms rather of greater provision through general practitioner services? If that is what the government has in mind, does the government intend, if I can put it very gently, and she knows that I'm always very understated in these matters, to put her money where her mouth is in terms of the extension not only of training for general practitioners in this area, but also, for example, of the provision of specialist backup services to complement the work of the GPs in the localities. Clearly, there is going to be an issue of cost, there is to be an issue of training. There is also, I think, Mr. Speaker, if we accept that the treatment of this disease will be essentially a multifaceted operation, a need for cooperation and coordination between these various sectors, it's quite a complicated equation, the treatment of diabetes. I don't think anybody is suggesting that it can all be dealt with in hospital or that it can all be dealt with at general practitioner level. There is a shortage of specialist nurses. What is to be done about it? When is it to be done? How can we be reassured? Fourthly, I would like to say something about the guidelines from the National Institute for Clinical Excellence in relation to 2 drugs which have been recognised as having a potential benefit in terms of palliative impact. Specifically, I have in mind, Mr. Speaker, pioglitazone and rosiglitazone. Now, these drugs are of some significance in this debate, Mr. Speaker. They are of significance both in the sense that they have been given a nudge and a recommendation, as I understand it, by the National Institute for Clinical Excellence, and they are significant also in the sense that they do require to be effective considerable knowledge and understanding of the disease on the part of the sufferers from it. I am well aware that those drugs are in no way suitable for all sufferers. If a sufferer is, and I indicated that many, through no fault of their own, are ignorant of how best to minimise their burden, the drug will probably be of very little use to them. On the other hand, if people do know quite a lot about their condition, for example, if they have suffered from it for a long time and have taken advice, I understand the medical experts suggest that these drugs can be of value to them. I think it is only fair to note in that context, and I'm not making a partisan point here in any way, Mr. Speaker, because this is applied under successive governments of both political persuasions, there is a great difference between the extent of the use of those 2 drugs which I have just mentioned in this country and use elsewhere. In relation to type 1 diabetes, we are talking about a tiny fraction of sufferers who use one or other of those 2 drugs. I think at the moment it's something like 0.5% of sufferers who use them. By contrast, we see that in Germany, in the Netherlands, in Norway, in Sweden, and in the United States, usage in the relevant type 1 category is of the order of 5% of sufferers. Now, maybe we should be ashamed of our performance. Maybe there are good reasons which explain the differential, about which I shall shortly be enlightened in the reply that the Honourable Lady provides. But it certainly does provide food for thought that we seem to have much lower usage of those drugs here than is in the case in those European countries and in the case of the United States of America. Does the government intend to improve take-up and use of those drugs in future? And if that is its intention, can we be sure that it is more than just an early pledge? There is going to be a resource implication. Does the government intend, in the very, very short time available to it before it makes way for my honourable friends and me on these benches to take over from them, to provide the resources that will be consistent with adequate provision? I'm sure we are about to be enlightened by the Honourable Lady, and that is, for me, an enticing prospect, Mr. Speaker. I would just like to turn to the 5th of the issues that I want to highlight to the Minister and to the House, Mr. Speaker, and that is the funding that is made available through the Medical Research Council for important studies in relation to the causes of diabetes, its incidence, and the means by which it can be effectively controlled. The Honourable Lady will be aware that in 1998 to 1999, something of the order of £3.5 million was made available for this purpose. And I think in 1999 to 2000, the figure was something like £6.5 million, a very substantial increase. Now, I certainly don't cavil at that. Those resources will probably have been used to very good effect. But I would like to be clear that there is a continuing study taking place of just what value for money we're getting. Are there benchmarks or yardsticks for future research? In other words, is the availability of the resource tied to an improvement in the findings of the Medical Research Council studies? And what in practical terms can we expect? Because we are all rather prone in this House, Mr. Speaker, to talk in terms of inputs. We are entirely justified in doing so, but actually, as far as the sufferers are concerned and the families of those who suffer are concerned, from this disease as from others, what interests them is not the question of input, but the question of output. What are the results? How are we improving? Are we detecting the disease earlier? Are we preventing it thereby? Are we treating it more effectively? Are we reducing its incidence? Can we hold out the prospect of a diabetes-free age, or at least of an age in which its incidence, as we would hope, is dramatically reduced? I would like finally to refer to the subject of insulin pumps. Once again, I think in relation to insulin pumps, usage is relatively low in this country by comparison with the practice elsewhere. In this respect, I'm a little bit uncertain as to exactly what the government has got in mind, because ministers did indicate in a consultation paper issued in July of last year that it would be good if the expert reference group conducted research to see whether insulin pumps would, on a wide rollout basis, be effective. That was in July of last year, but curiously, on February the 26th of this year, in a written answer to the Honourable Lady, the member for Romsey, provided by the Parliamentary Under-Secretary, the Honourable Lady's friend and colleague, the member for Birmingham Edgbaston, she said that no comprehensive evaluation had taken place of insulin pumps and that no specific guidance had been issued. Now, is that a final position on the part of the government, or does the government intend at some stage to do something about it? I think I'm right in saying, again, here, the use of those pumps is much smaller in this country than it is elsewhere. Indeed, it may well be that the statistics that I quoted earlier apply in particular to this point. I think that they do, and that usage in other countries is that much greater. So there is a need for a vision, there is a need for a series of practical steps, and there is a need, by way of reassurance and encouragement to the sufferers, for some indication of a timescale within which these important objectives will be accomplished. I look forward immensely to what the Minister has to say by way of reply. And just before I complete my remarks, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank you for your indulgence, and I would like to conclude by paying tribute once again to the parliamentary and political giant of our times, the Right Honourable Gentleman, the member for Chesterfield, who is here for the final time in this chamber after, I think, 51 years and 3 months since he was first elected to this House. Now, I know the Right Honourable Gentleman doesn't want to be embarrassed by excessive effusions from his lifelong political enemies, but I say to the Right Honourable Gentleman and to the House that a modest dose of embarrassment doesn't do harm to anyone's health, and what I say to him is very sincerely meant. The term, of course, is much abused and much overused in our political life, but he is genuinely a great man. Of course, I give way to him.
I wasn't expecting the honourable gentleman's comment, but can I just say this about this debate? There will be no report of his speech in the press. The speech he made was not one that could in any way be linked to the election campaign. It's a scholarly speech that he's made about a matter of great interest. The Minister will reply, and it'll be a good debate. And when people say Parliament has lost the confidence of the people, it is in part because they do not know how conscientious members can raise important questions and get proper replies, and Hansard will be the only newspaper that will record his speech, but I shall long remember it.
Well, that was typically gracious from the Right Honourable Gentleman. I agree with him about the central point. The longer ones in this place, and I've only been here 4 years and 10 days, Mr. Speaker, the more one appreciates that actually the vast majority of members of Parliament on all sides of the House are honest, conscientious, decent and hard-working. The activities of the recalcitrant minority tend to besmirch the good name of the majority, and it would be fatal for democracy itself, Mr. Speaker, if the profession of politics, which is a perfectly noble calling, were ultimately to be brought into disrepute. The Right Honourable Gentleman is the particular champion of principle in politics, but sitting below him, the Honourable Gentleman, the member for Workington, has been a similarly principled, steadfast, dedicated and selfless representative of his constituents over a very long period, and I wish him a long and enjoyable retirement as well. There is no doubt at all in my mind, Mr. Speaker, that MPs do have real opportunities to raise important issues on behalf of their constituents. This is one such, and in concluding and looking forward to the Minister's reply, I can simply say that there is no greater privilege for any Briton than to be a Member of Parliament. Every day as I come into the Palace of Westminster and take my seat in this House, which, as you know, Mr. Speaker, I do with monotonous regularity, I come in with a glint in my eye, a spring in my step, and a feeling of great gratitude for what my constituents have given me the opportunity to do.
Sir Peter Emery.
Mr. Speaker, may I thank the Honourable Member for Buckingham for the speech that he has just made. 4 years and 10 days, it may be, but in that time he has earned a reputation as a terrier of the opposition. But one of the factors which he is able and has done to prove today that he is a very serious politician who has learnt his trade well, and in the speech that he's just made has presented a case which needs much wider, as the Right Honourable Gentleman for Chesterfield pointed out, a much wider spread of information. And yet when we look up there, there isn't one member of the press actually present. And that's a great shame, and never used to be the case when the Honourable Gentleman for Chesterfield and I came into the House. I want to, on the subject of that raised by my honourable friend, just make 2 points. The tragedy that can be brought about by this illness is frequently entirely misunderstood or not known. A colleague that many members of this House will remember, Sir Peter Horton, his son, unknown to the family, suddenly had a area of loss of insulin to the extent that he became unconscious, to the extent that now, 4 years later, he needs 24-hour nursing. He cannot speak, and he has very little control over himself. Now here is the son of a man who had all the background of being able to be looked after before and luckily since, but it is a terrifying indication of how ghastly the effects of this disease can actually be. And that's why I wanted to emphasize the point that was made by my honourable friend. The other question that I would like to make, again, concerns a constituent as such, where suddenly her 7-year-old son, on a school trip, fell ill, luckily was quickly diagnosed as being diabetic, and has since been stabilized so that he is back at school and even able to play games. So it is possible with the disease to be able to get on top of it if properly dealt with. But I would like to ask the Minister whether he will pay particular attention to furthering information about the diabetic treatment of the very young, because to have to go through the whole of your life from 6, 7 or 8, having to inject, having to watch carefully the whole of your level, it is a matter which, for the very young, a terrifying worry for the parents, but of course a ghastly situation for the patient themselves. And I would like to get an assurance from the Minister that proper attention within the health service is given to that particular area where diabetes hits the youngsters. In closing, Mr. Speaker, if I may for a moment, I would like to pay tribute, if I can, to the tens of thousands of people who have been kind enough, first of all, in a by-election or an election in Poplar, where they weighed the Labour votes, they only just counted mine, to Reading, where my first contact with now Lady Boothroyd, who was the aide to the then sitting member, Geoffrey de Freitas, and to my erstwhile colleague, and I call him a colleague, although we were on other sides of the house, to Nick Mercado, who I was, for him, unfortunate, for me, fortunate to be able to defeat in 1959, because if I had not done so, he was then a vice chairman of the Labour Party. And when 1964 came around, he would have been a minister, and without any doubt, having to be included in Mr. Wilson's government at that time. But by being defeated for me and out for 4 years, that never came about. And I pay tribute to him. He was often accounted as the Reds under the bed, while my side made accusations about him. Mainly, I'm afraid to say, massively exaggerated. But he was a very solid member of this House and a very good constituency member. And then, lastly, to my constituents of the lovely part of East Devon, Honiton, who have been kind enough for 34 years to add to the 7 in Reading that I have been able to be in this House. I am so lucky that I've been able to be given this opportunity, and I thank not only those who voted for me, but many of those who didn't, but have supported some of the work that I've done in this House and tried to do. And the very last thing I say is this. When people come into the House, they must remember that not everybody can be a minister. There are only a very limited number who actually become ministers. There is a vast job to be done for members of Parliament in many different ways in this House. I've pursued it in procedure, as most members know. Since, 1984, I've been associated with trying to ensure that we can more thoroughly and more simply and properly consider legislation when it went through the House. Still not yet accomplished. I pray it may happen in the next Parliament. But the benefit that can be given by good members of Parliament, not seeking to be ministers but doing their proper job in the House of Commons, is very real. And I, Mr. Speaker, am most grateful that I've been given that opportunity. I'm a very lucky man.
John Hutton.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Speaker, can I first of all apologise to the honourable gentleman and to you, sir, for missing the opening of this debate. There is a general election going on at the moment, and I'm afraid I got involved somewhere else, but I do apologise to the honourable gentleman. I know he was looking forward to hearing my honourable friend, the member for Castleford and Pontefract, reply to his debate, and I think he described that as an enticing prospect. He probably is less enticed by the prospect of me having to respond to his debate, but maybe that's something we can discuss outside. But what I would certainly want to do is to join the tribute that my right honourable friend, the member for Chesterfield, paid to the honourable gentleman in his remarks. All of us who've had the privilege to sit on this side of the House during this Parliament have come used to hearing from the honourable gentleman a very lucid, clear, assiduous explanation of his points. And when he speaks on issues like this, in the spirit that he's spoken on today, I think it's very hard to find a single word with which anyone on this side of the House would disagree with him. However, when he speaks about political issues, I think most of us recoil from most of his positions, but he won't be offended by that, and I'm sure he is. And of course, he will understand the spirit within which that comment has been made. Before I respond to the particular points that he has made during the course of his very thoughtful and as my honourable friend, or our right honourable friend said, very scholarly series of remarks, I would just like to take this opportunity, Mr. Speaker, as well, to pay a personal tribute to both of my honourable friends who are here today, who are retiring at this election. Both my right honourable friend, the member for Chesterfield, who has made an outstanding contribution to the politics of this country for many, many years, who's committed to the cause of democratic socialism, as we all are, and who cares deeply about the health and well-being of the party. Which has given him and us, all of us on this side of the House, such a wonderful opportunity to speak up for people in this country and to defend the principles and values that we hold so dear. And the same is true with Spades for my honourable friend, the member for Workington, who is a fellow Cumbrian member of Parliament, who is held in the very widest and deepest respect throughout the county of Cumbria for the work that he has done over 20 years in representing his constituency with fantastic skill and dedication. And I think I can speak for probably all of us here today, certainly for all of us on this side of the House, who find it very hard to believe that these two outstanding individuals will not be with us in the new Parliament to support the work of, I hope, a radical and reforming Labour government, which I hope will be elected on June the 7th. But for both of my honourable friends, I personally extend the very warmest wishes for the future and look forward, as I'm sure we all do, to hearing their continuing contribution to the political debate in our society. I would also like, very briefly, just to pay tribute to the work of the honourable gentleman, the member for East Devon too, who, as he reminded this House, was elected, I think, in 1959 to this place. I was 3 years old on that occasion. And one of the things that has always struck me about this place, Mr. Speaker, is the continuity, actually, between the generations, which I think speaks volumes, for not only for this place, but for the people who serve in this place too. We get a bad press. Some of it is justified. But I don't think those of us who know about Parliament and the House of Commons would want to call into question certainly the honourable gentleman's commitment to this place and his serving the cause of parliamentary democracy. It's a distinguished record, and I'm very grateful and happy to pay tribute to it. Well, I have no knowledge of that. Perhaps in the light of my comments, I might get to sample some of those in the near future. I would also, great. Well, I think it's your place or mine then. But what I would also like to say to the honourable gentleman, and I hope he won't mind me saying this, I'd also like to pay tribute to his wife, Lady Emery, who I have had dealings with in my role as the Minister for Social Services, who does and has done an outstanding role and outstanding work with International Social Services. It's a fantastic organisation. She has been a marvellous advocate and champion for what it does. But having gone through the parliamentary pleasantries, which I'm delighted to have had the opportunity to do, speaking as I am as the last minister, Labour minister in this Parliament, I would like now to turn to what the Honourable Member for Buckingham has said about the important subject of the treatment of diabetes. The Honourable Member rightly referred in his speech to the Diabetes Pledge issued recently by Diabetes UK, which urged decision makers in this place and healthcare professionals as well to recognise the seriousness of diabetes as a growing health challenge, and we certainly do. So I'd like to reassure the honourable gentleman, right at the beginning of my remarks, Mr. Speaker, of the seriousness with which the government takes the subject of diabetes. Diabetes, as he says, has a major impact on the lives of nearly 1.5 million of our fellow citizens who have diagnosed diabetes, either type 1, which of course is insulin dependent, or type 2, which is non-insulin dependent diabetes. And as he rightly said, the number of people with type 2 diabetes in particular is forecast to increase significantly over the next decade. And yet we know at the same time that healthy eating, physical activity and weight management can prevent or delay the onset of type 2 diabetes. If not properly managed, diabetes can result in a range of long-term complications: cardiovascular disease, blindness, renal failure, lower limb problems leading to amputation, and in some cases to earlier death. And as a consequence, it also has a significant impact on the National Health Service itself. Diabetes and its complications cost the National Health Service nearly £5 billion a year, or 10% of its overall expenditure. And as the Honourable Gentleman himself observed, there is also evidence of unacceptable variations in the standard of diabetes service provision around the country, as the Audit Commission study of diabetes recently demonstrated. That report too showed some areas of very good practice, with staff working across sectors to improve patient care, but these examples are not always widely shared across the NHS, and I believe very strongly, actually, that there's nothing wrong with the NHS that can't be put right by what is best about the National Health Service. And I think that particularly applies to some of the issues that the Honourable Gentleman has described today. And it is these variations in the organisation and quality of services that has prompted the government to announce in 1999 the development of a new National Service Framework for Diabetes in England. And I want to say more about that in a second. But I think it's also worth highlighting, Mr. Speaker, that the government has taken action in different spheres to help improve the lives of people with diabetes. For instance, we responded positively to a campaign by Diabetes UK by adding insulin pen needles and certain reusable insulin pens to the drug tariff last year, making them available for the first time on GP prescription. And on a different matter, following a review prompted by the House of Commons Science and Technology Committee inquiry into driving and diabetes, new arrangements came into effect, in fact, last month, for individual medical assessment of people with insulin-treated diabetes who apply for licenses to drive small goods vehicles. Certainly the government is willing to listen to the concerns of people with diabetes, and where we can to act upon them. Now, the Honourable Gentleman asked me a number of questions about the National Service Framework, and I'll try and deal with the points that he made. The aims of the Diabetes National Service Framework are to improve health outcomes for people with diabetes by raising the quality of services and reducing the variations that currently exist. And in doing so, I expect it to address the issues highlighted in Diabetes UK Diabetes Pledge. The scope of the Diabetes National Service Framework is broad and will cover prevention, identification and management of diabetes and its complications, including rehabilitation and continuing care. The National Service Framework will set clear national standards that we shall expect to see implemented in future. It will also define new service models, put in place effective strategies to support implementation and delivery of the new standards, and establish performance measures against which progress within an agreed timescale will be measured and monitored. As with previous national service frameworks, that for diabetes has been developed in very close consultation and work from an expert advisory group that has brought together service users, patients, healthcare professionals, and health service managers. This group, as the Honourable Gentleman was chaired in a very effective and distinguished way by Professor Mike Pringle, who is chair of the Council at the Royal College of General Practitioners, and Peter Houghton, Regional Director of the Eastern Regional Office of the NHS Executive. We have published information about and arising from the development of the Diabetes National Service Framework on the World Wide Web. The framework itself we expect to publish later this year for implementation across the NHS in 2002. In general terms, what we are seeking to do is to put the person with diabetes at the centre of the healthcare system. His or her needs must be paramount. It will be a model for how the NHS supports and cares for people who are disadvantaged in some way, in this case as a consequence of chronic disease. The Diabetes National Service Framework is an important plank of the government's quality and modernisation agenda for the NHS. In 1997, shortly after taking office, we set out how we intended to set a clear structure that holds those who deliver services to proper account. In the White Paper, The New NHS, and the policy document of first-class service, the government introduced a range of measures which we hope will raise the quality and standards and decrease unacceptable variations in service provision. Standards will be, in the first instance, set by the National Institute for Clinical Excellence and by national service frameworks, delivered locally by means of clinical governance, underpinned by professional self-regulation and lifelong learning for staff, and monitored by the new Commission for Health Improvement, the NHS Performance Assessment Framework, and the NHS Patients Survey. I think for the first time in the history of the National Health Service, we are trying to set clear national standards to guarantee fair treatment wherever patients live, whether in the Honourable Gentleman's constituency or in mine. And for the first time, we are inspecting all parts of the health service to ensure that patients get the top-class service that they deserve. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I can say to the Honourable Gentleman, the quality agenda, which I'm sure he also places very heavy emphasis on, is at the heart of the government strategy for modernising the National Health Service. The NHS plan takes this agenda further still, introducing further steps to improve both customer service and the safety of patient care. The plan sets out how we will develop the role of primary care through better facilities. I know the Honourable Gentleman was concerned about the balance between secondary and primary care, and that will of course apply in relation to the treatment of diabetes, with more staff and more integrated and multidisciplinary working. This will raise the standard of care for people with diabetes in primary care, easing the pressure on hospitals so they can concentrate on providing the necessary specialist care. And Diabetes UK's Diabetes Pledge referred to the importance of patient-centred care. Care dictated by the needs of the patient, not the system, will of course be at the core of the NHS plan. The government therefore attaches very great importance to involving patients, carers and the wider public in decisions about health service policy and delivery. That is why we have made great efforts to ensure that we have heard the voices of people with diabetes and of parents of children, I know that's a concern of the Honourable Gentleman, in the development of the Diabetes National Service Framework. There were, for example, two individuals with diabetes on the expert reference group itself, plus Paul Streets from Diabetes UK itself. There were other people with diabetes on the various topic areas set up by the expert reference group. And there were over 40 people with diabetes amongst the 120 or so people who attended a 24-hour workshop in October 2000 to focus on patients and care pathways. And the National Centre for Social Research was commissioned to run user focus groups and to conduct in-depth interviews with people with diabetes. We also wanted individual patients to play a much greater role in determining the care that the NHS itself provides for them. We believe that an NHS that works effectively with patients will deliver better results for individual patients and better health for the whole population. An example of this, the Honourable Gentleman might be interested to know, I think, is provided in Bradford with the work being done by the Health Action Zone there. It's developing models for delivering diabetes care within primary care. The local community and healthcare professionals are working together to improve the diabetes care within this sector through the development of new care models. Bradford, I think, demonstrates how our determination to modernise the NHS and to tackle inequalities can result in improvements to services. Encouraging people with diabetes to play a full role in the management of their own condition will be a cornerstone, I think, of effective care in the future. To do this, we need to help them develop the knowledge and skills to become partners in their own care. Diabetes is an excellent example of the need for a partnership between patient and clinician. And as I have suggested, Mr. Speaker, this will be a key focus of the Diabetes National Service Framework. It is also central to the work of the Expert Patients Task Force, which was established by the Chief Medical Officer, which I expect to inspire a major expansion of patient-led self-management programs across the NHS. Indeed, the NHS plan committed us to establishing a comprehensive expert patients program, and we will deliver on that commitment. And the Honourable Gentleman is quite right to draw attention to the particular prevalence of diabetes in South Asian, Black African and Black Caribbean people. The Diabetes National Service Framework will therefore pay particular heed to the needs of those who are disproportionately affected by diabetes, including people from minority ethnic groups. The Honourable Gentleman, I think, was also right to stress, Mr. Speaker, the importance of detecting diabetes as early as possible, an issue highlighted by Diabetes UK in their Diabetes Pledge and indeed in their Missing Million campaign. Whether or not there are as many as 1 million people in the UK with undiagnosed diabetes, as Diabetes UK have estimated, early detection to enable early treatment is clearly important. That is why we asked the UK National Screening Committee to consider how it could most effectively be achieved and whether there was a case for the introduction of a targeted screening programme or more active case finding for type 2 diabetes. The evidence on screening for type 2 diabetes, I have to say to the Honourable Gentleman, is not clear-cut. The National Screening Committee came back with proposals for a type 2 diabetes development project, which was approved by ministers last month. The project will aim to assess the implications of targeted screening for those working in primary care and the practical issues in its delivery. It is being designed to dovetail into existing research projects on screening for type 2 diabetes and should ensure that we have a clear picture of whether or not screening is the most appropriate way to improve identification of this condition. And once they are received, the National Screening Committee's conclusions will inform the implementation of the Diabetes National Service Framework, as too will its recommendations for a national screening programme for diabetic retinopathy, which the Honourable Gentleman raised and which we published last November. But once diabetes has been diagnosed, Mr. Speaker, we know that the tight control of blood pressure and blood glucose levels are of key importance in its management. The UK Prospective Diabetes Study found that the lives of people with type 2 diabetes can be saved by more frequent checks and better treatment to keep blood glucose and blood pressure levels as normal as possible. The Department of Health and the NHS, together with the Medical Research Council, Diabetes UK and other sponsors, made a major investment over many years in this programme. It's an example of the real life-saving benefits that can come from investment in high-quality, long-term research. And of course, the government itself makes a significant contribution to diabetes research, both through the Medical Research Council and through the NHS support for research and development. Now, the Honourable Gentleman also raised the work of the National Institute for Clinical Excellence in all of this, and I want to say something about that now, because, of course, there is a whole raft of other work on diabetes that feeds into the new quality agenda to which I referred earlier, including that of the National Institute for Clinical Excellence. NICE will help to ensure that the NHS provides the best possible treatment with the available resources to bring an end to the lottery of care, which concerns the Honourable Gentleman and all of us in this House, in which some treatments are available in some areas but not in others. NICE will be issuing clinical guidance on aspects of the management of type 2 diabetes later this autumn and will be developing clinical guidelines for type 1 diabetes for publication next year. In recent months, NICE has also praised the effectiveness of the 2 new diabetes drugs to which the Honourable Gentleman referred and published guidance on their use earlier this year. And in relation to the NICE guidance, of course, NICE did review the evidence of both the clinical and cost effectiveness of these 2 drugs recently. Guidance for both drugs was similar, that either can be considered as a, as a possible alternative to insulin for patients with type 2 diabetes, whose condition is not being satisfactorily controlled by diet and other tablets, And of course, it will give doctors another tool in the armoury of treatment available to them. But of course, it will still be up to individual clinical judgment for any one patient. But yes, given the nice guidance, their use, they're both, of course, new drugs on the market, can be expected to increase in the future. And earlier this week, my right honourable friend, the member for Southampton, the Minister of State for Health, announced consultation on the proposed next wave of appraisal topics to be referred to the National Institute. It includes 3 diabetes topics: insulin pump therapy, which the honourable gentleman again quite properly referred to, insulin glargine and other long-acting insulin analogues, and other patient education models for diabetes. And we shall consider further diabetes issues for possible addition to NICE's future work programme. But the importance, Mr. Speaker, of giving the person with diabetes appropriate information, again a subject quite properly referred to by the honourable gentleman, was one of the issues highlighted by the tragic death of a young woman with diabetes, on which the Health Service Ombudsman issued a special report only last December. The Ombudsman made specific recommendations to the GP and the hospital involved, but as he suggested, there are wider lessons to be learned from this sad case about the diagnosis and treatment of diabetes, which we are determined to learn. And we shall look to ensure that those lessons are taken on board within the context of the Diabetes National Service Framework. Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, I should like to highlight some of the dramatic improvements in health outcomes that research suggests we can expect once best practice becomes the norm. We should be able to aim to reduce deaths related to diabetes by a third, reduce the risks of coronary heart disease, of strokes, of kidney damage, and of serious deterioration of vision by at least a third. Diabetes is the biggest cause of blindness in people of working age, and we can significantly reduce amputations and ulcers. We could also provide better coordinated patient and family-focused services for children and for young people, making the transition to adult services. Now, these are all major goals for the treatment of diabetes in the future. The Diabetes National Framework will, for the first time, give us, I think, the practical means to make sure that becomes a reality.
Dale Campbell-Savours.
Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend has given a very substantial response to the debate which was brought forward by the honourable gentleman, the member for Buckingham, and I don't think I can usefully add to what he says, apart from to say that I've had a number of constituents over the years who I'm sure, having been to me on these matters, will now reflect on his words during the course of the debate. Can I thank him for his very generous remarks, and perhaps insofar as this is an adjournment debate, and I think I have some understanding of procedure, we're therefore allowed to go slightly wider and remain within order. I'd just like to say one or two words to the House before I disappear off into the sunset in my retirement. I often, certainly over the last few days, as indeed will many of my honourable friends who are retiring, have had cause to reflect on why I ever came into the House of Commons, or tried originally in 1974 to come to the House of Commons in a by-election, in the general election, and then in a by-election 76, which I lost, and then subsequently came in 79. And in my own case, it was a conversation that I had with my mother when I was in my late teens, when she told me that in this life, to really make a contribution to the way the world works, you really have to engage yourself in public service in some way. And at a time when we were all in our teens and in our 20s formulating our political views, many of us sought a political route as the way of entering into public service, and some go on to be ministers and some become parliamentarians, and as indeed in the case of my honourable friend, great and eminent parliamentarians. And I've watched with great interest over the years new generations of young people coming into the House, and I've often set out to help them in their early days and given them my advice, because I was given advice by one man who subsequently defected to the Conservative Party, but he was very good to me when I was elected, John Horam, and also by the late Bob Cryer. And I always remembered that. They helped me when I knew that many were not being helped, and I resolved that I would help others. And I really think it pays, because over the last few days I've had a number of letters and many conversations with people who've recorded the times and occasions in their early political lives when I was able to give them some advice which they took and proved useful to them. And I hope that as the new crop come in after this election, as indeed there will be people who set aside time to help them. Because it's rewarding both for the giver and in particular for the receiver. I've also watched over recent years as well the developments on the other side with the new crop, and I'll call them again, of young Conservative members coming into the Commons who in many ways reflect the same sorts of approach as we had when we came in, and that was to oppose the government. And to be frank, I've been quite impressed. The problem is there are not enough of them engaged in the practice. It's strange that when I came in, some of the people who used to say to me, get on with it, were Conservatives. And they used to say, it's easier for you in the opposition to deal with issues which very often we find politically embarrassing. That's the truth of it. And we had a good crop. We used to call them the Fighting 40 in my days, when I was first elected. I always remember. We used to come in here, hold the government to ransom. All night we'd run if we could. There were some very memorable occasions. But the point was, it was an art. And you learnt. And you mastered procedure. And we spent hours in the chamber sometimes just learning. We looked forward to the procedural feasts when people would get themselves involved in all sorts of difficult procedural wrangles. I remember George Cunningham, who went subsequent to the SDP, one of the great, parliamentarians that I recall. Alec Lyon, people like that who were very, very good at teaching us how this place worked. There is no politics in it. It's about being a parliamentarian. And my plea, as I leave here, is that more people recognise that to be a parliamentarian, and a great parliamentarian, is more important in many ways than being a great minister. It really is. Because I think that great parliamentarians, like my honourable friend, will be remembered for generations, where ministers may well often be forgotten. And I do not say that out of any disrespect for my honourable friend, because he will be remembered. He is my tip for the Cabinet in the next session of Parliament. But I do really wish to emphasise this, and I want to see a whole career structure built whereby members, when they're elected, they choose a route and they decide which way they want to do. Do they want to be held to account, or do they want to hold others to account? It's very important, because when we secure that kind of Parliament where people see this as the place to develop through, and there is a career structure, the paying the chairman of select committees and whatever, give them some incentive for going into being part of the legislature, I think that this House will benefit immeasurably. And I'd just like to say something else as well. I read all this, what I regard as pap and drivel in the press, about how my honourable friends have formed part of some sort of compliant Labour majority in the House of Commons. It's simply untrue. I think that the quality of questioning of many of my honourable friends on these benches over the last 4 years has been excellent. And there are a large number of my own honourable friends who've been prepared to ask awkward questions of ministers and hold them to account both inside and outside of the House of Commons. That's the truth. But the problem is that the press are not prepared to face up to the reality of what really is going on. And that is that there is accountability. All I say for the future is that it can be improved. Can I finally say that I have loved this place, as indeed many of my honourable friends have who leave, and indeed many who remain, and will love it more into the future. It's been a huge honour for me to be here. I'm indebted to the people in my own constituency who put me here, my party, and to all the friends that I've made over all these years.
Before the honourable gentleman puts his point of order, the clerk advises me that it's not normal for the honourable members but backbenchers to rise after the minister. But what I've said is that today won't be a precedent, and it won't be a precedent that the Speaker takes part in the debates, but I'm going to do so today. I'm going to say to the right honourable gentleman, the honourable gentleman for Buckingham, that he could have applied for an adjournment debate, which would perhaps, with a general election coming on, would have been more relevant to his own constituency and perhaps given him some political advantage. He didn't do that. He raised a matter that affects each and every one of us in our communities, the problem of diabetes. And I think I hope that the tradition of the adjournment debate always continues, where a minister can come down and give an account of his stewardship regarding any subject. And I say that this is a good thing that the honourable gentleman has done. But can I also say this, that I look at the small gathering we have, and everyone, both sides of the House, I regard you all as friends. And they say that a speaker shouldn't have any friends. What I say is that he should have as many friends as possible. But no favourites. But I look at the right honourable gentleman for East Devon, and I remember that when I was first on a select committee, my first select committee, that he was so helpful. He showed me a generosity and a kindness which I realise is typical of the right honourable gentleman. And I remember when we did our first trip abroad, it's not fair to say the land that we visited, but we went to a factory, and I was a great man with a camera, and in this factory, in this third world country, there was charcoal in the floor, there was molten metal being pushed in a trolley, and to keep the metal from spillage, there was rags and sand being thrown on by the labourers, and there was the roof, there was no proper roof. And I said, Peter, I'm going to take a photograph of this, put it in my election address and call it Thatcher's Britain. But I wish him well. I wish him very well indeed. And I know we'll see him again because he's going to do a lot of work for the retired members. But I also remember the member for Workington came in the same day as us, and we were so confused. And the honourable gentleman decided that every day he was going to spend hours in the chamber. He was going to learn procedure. So when I nipped off to the tea room, I said, no, Dale, I don't want to do that. But he did. And it ended up that not only did the younger members come to the honourable gentleman on procedure, but the older members came to the honourable gentleman procedure. And I take on board what the honourable gentleman says is that no new member should come into this House and be thrown into the deep end. They should be helped. And that's a tradition that I've always had as a member, because I knew that some, not all, but some of the senior members just didn't bother with the new members, and they should give them every advice possible. And I'll miss the honourable gentleman. Now, I say to the right honourable gentleman for Chesterfield, he will recall that he mentioned to me that his wife, dear wife Carolyn, was writing a book about Care Hardy. And in Glasgow, we always talk about the district we come from. It's not just Glasgow, but we come from a certain district. And I said that I came from the district of Anderson, and next door was the district of Partick, where Care Hardy came from. And I said, please tell Carolyn that in her research you'll find that he spent a number of his childhood years in Partick, where my mother had her first, mother and father had the first tenement flat, what we called a single end in Glasgow. The following day, there was a book, the biography of Care Hardy by his dear wife, and it was signed by Carolyn. It's up in the study, in the speaker's study at the moment. I'll always treasure that book. And it was so nice of the honourable gentleman that conversation at tea room was carried home, and there was that book personally signed by the author. I appreciate that. So I wish you all very well indeed. I wish you all the best for the future, and those who are going out to an election, I wish you all well. But I think that we have a point of order. Mr. Talbot.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I hesitate to raise a point of order such as I'm going to raise after such a kindly and thoughtful set of remarks that we've just heard from you. I rise to ask for a delay in the adjournment to enable the government to answer the inconsistency between statements in the House on the 14th of May and 1st of June 1998 and the action the government took on the 4th and 5th of June, 4 or 5 days later, when at the behest of the Hinduja brothers, the Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary met the Indian Prime Minister's special advisor. At that time, India had just conducted nuclear tests, and India, the Foreign Secretary said, and I quote, should pay for isolation in the international community. The British government cancelled visits of the Indian chiefs of staff and asked for a review by the European Commission of preferential trade treatment. Yet at the very time this was going on, the Foreign Secretary was making these statements to the House that at the very moment that he was making these statements, we now know that arrangements were already being made for the Indian special advisor to the Indian Prime Minister to come and see...
Order. What I can say to the honourable gentleman is that my answer is no. And he can't make a case through a point of order, a substantive case. He put the case, and the Foreign Secretary won't be making a statement. It's as simple as that. Order. A point of order, Mr. Skinner.
This is a bit more important. Have you read the Daily Mirror this morning, Mr. Speaker? Because in it, there's a column by Paul Routledge, and he talks about saying goodbye to my right honourable friend, the member for Chesterfield, and others. And because he didn't do his homework, and it's all about sloppy journalism today, and, you know, you've had plenty of points of order about sloppy journalism from the other side. Turns out not to be true.
Riddle's beer.
He said that I'm retiring as well. Well, I've got news for the Mirror and Routledge. I shall be back here in this place on June, what is it, the 13th? We shall have an election for the Speaker.
Time to girls, mate.
We probably might not have an election. He might get in, and he might get nodded through. So to Paul Routledge and everybody else, I shall be back here. And we shall be fighting for redistribution of wealth from the city financiers to the poor and to those that my honourable friends have represented over the years. And those in Glasgow, and Partick in particular, they'll benefit as well.
Yeah. I'll let the people of Partick know.
Mr. Waiting for a message from the Lords, or whether we're ready to go. But is it in order to thank you? You've broken another precedent today by making a speech from the chair. I tell all visitors the characteristic of the Speaker never makes a speech, and you've changed that. You have been a marvellous Speaker, kind to us personally, good in the chair, and I, for one, bitterly resent the criticisms being made, which are wholly unfounded, and from watching from afar, I shall see you re-elected within the month. Thank you very much.
I think it was Harry Truman who said that if they were giving out compliments, I'm sure to be in the wrong queue. Can I now mention Royal Assent? I have to notify the House, in accordance with the Royal Assent Act 1967, that Her Majesty has signified a Royal Assent to the following acts: Appropriation Act 2001, Finance Act 2001, Special Education Needs and Disability Act 2001, Social Security Fraud Act 2001, Private Security Industry Act 2001, House of Commons Removal of Clergy Disqualification Act 2001, Rating Former Agricultural Premises and Rural Shops Act 2001, Health and Social Care Act 2001, Criminal Justice and Police Act 2001, International Criminal Court Act 2001, Children's Commissioner for Wales Act 2001, Armed Forces Act 2001, Social Security Contributions Share Options Act 2001. These are to certify that Her Majesty, being unable to personally present in Parliament at this time, has been pleased to cause letters patent to be issued under the Great Seal and thereby signified her royal assent to Divers Act, which has been agreed upon both Houses of Parliament, the short titles of which are set out in schedule here too, and by the said letters patent has commanded that her Royal Assent be notified separately to each House of Parliament pursuant to the Royal Assent Act 1967. Given under my hand at the Crown Office this 11th day of May 2001, Deputy Clerk of the Crown in Chancery. Do you read the following? The question is that this House do now adjourn. As many as their opinions say aye. Aye. Of the country, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order, order.